Sorry for running a few minutes late. I've been acting as IT support as well for the other room, so running back and forth. I'm Matthew Hardy. I work for Adobe. I'm an engineering manager in Adobe's Document Cloud. I've worked at Acrobat for a long time, and so that's kind of what I bring to these meetings is a perspective on having worked in that product, and particularly accessibility. So it may be a little bit strange to see me on stage not talking about accessibility, because that's usually my main topic. Today I want to talk about something a little bit different, what I call document adaptation, particularly responsiveness and personalization of content. And this is I'm hoping this ties together several of the threads that we've seen running through this conference about rich data, semantics, enhanced use of content. And so that's what I intend to talk about in this presentation. Let's cast our mind back 26 years. So I think everyone probably knows just offhand, June 15th, 1993 was the release of Acrobat 1 PDF. But the Camelot project that started it all was actually started several years before that. And John Warnock famously published what was known as the Camelot paper, where he described the goals of the PDF project. And he said, this project's goal is to solve a fundamental problem that confronts today's companies. The problem is concerned with our ability to communicate visual material between different computer applications and systems. I think we can all say that PDF has been a great success in this matter, that if you think about how it's distributed, its ability to capture visual material accurately and in a way that moves between any system, it's a huge success. And so that's a very positive statement for PDF. There are literally trillions, and I use the plural intentionally, trillions of PDFs in existence today. So over the last 26 years, since PDF first became available to the public, this has been a hugely successful project. However, it was designed in an era where computers looked like this. And the problem that was being solved was what I would refer to the digital paper problem, the ability to take content, maybe the other way around, the ability to take content and reproduce it faithfully with all of its properties intact in terms of layout, sizing, fonts, color, all of these characteristics. But as you can imagine, and it was a success. I just want to repeat that. No one's saying PDF failed. I think that by any metric, it's been a huge success. But when we look at how the technological landscape looks today, it's a very, very different platform. You know, we have different screen sizes, what I refer to from watch to wall. We have different input devices, so whether my computer's got keyboard, mouse, trackpad, or is a touchscreen, whether I'm using oral input to talk to my Amazon Echo or Google Home, computers have fundamentally changed. And so it's not that PDF did anything wrong. In fact, PDF is a real success story. But I do believe that if we don't continue to adapt, it won't necessarily be that big a success story in the future. It's not going to go away. I totally buy that PDF is here to stay for a very long time. But there was a great question asked yesterday about where does PDF come from its longevity, and I think this is something we have to think about as an industry. What do we want from PDF as we move forward? PDF was made successful because of its concept of this longevity, this document of record concept. And that was the final answer we came to in yesterday's panel, if you recall. Why hasn't HTML supplanted PDF or vice versa? And they both meet very different needs. But PDF's primary need is one of being able to convey that document of record and that consistency. And so if we do continue to build on PDF, we can't lose the strength it has. This is a key value proposition that PDF has to retain all the way into the future. On the other hand, I think it's also part of what's made it a big challenge for PDF. PDF is designed to faithfully reproduce what you print to it, what you capture visually. And so the paths that we have used to actually create PDF, we refer to it often as printing to PDF, not converting or creating PDF, but printing to PDF. And that printing has actually had a very harmful effect on PDF, because what it means is when you do it, you throw away all that rich semantics, that knowledge of what a PDF is, or what the content is, the semantics of that content, and instead you're focused on turning it into something that has visual fidelity. And as I said, that's a very positive property, but it does mean you lose something. You don't have to, just to be clear, PDF doesn't have to lose that, but it's been a natural sort of low-cost way to produce PDF has been to go for the visual reproduction, whether it's taking a GDI stream and turning that into a visual layout, whether it's actually having the underlying rendering engine of your OS, Quartz, for example, being a PDF-based system that can then serialize out to disk as a file. These are challenges we face in PDF today. So, before I talk about some of the solutions, let me just kind of frame why I think this is a problem. I've shown you the landscape, but what am I talking about when I talk about responsiveness? Well, the first thing I'm talking about is the obvious type of responsiveness. Sort of, we've got a lot of screen sizes. And at the moment, PDF works really well when I view it on my desktop size or laptop size screen, but when I start to use it on my mobile phone, it can very quickly break down. That doesn't mean all PDF does, just to be clear. If I convert kind of these PowerPoint slides to PDF, which I have done, and then put that on my phone, it actually looks really quite good. It's still consumable. But when I take an academic article, a scientific journal, a magazine, and try to take that text, it's barely readable on a phone. I have to pinch and zoom. I have to scan around that. Now, I do have, hopefully, a video here just to kind of highlight some of the things. And I want to just frame this video. This isn't intended to show a success story. This isn't a failure either. It's just, this is a feature that's been in our mobile product. This is the iOS version of that product for several years. This is a classic PDF. It's hard to read on a small screen. Oh, you're not seeing it because Duff shared Acrobat and not the screen. Sorry. Help if I was talking to something you could all see. Let me restart that. Okay, let's try that again. So this is a feature that's been in Acrobat iOS for many years. It's not some new product I'm trying to show off here. It takes classic PDF. It looks at the content. If I was trying to read this, I have to pinch and zoom a lot to be able to actually consume this content. And so we have this thing called reading mode. And when you go into it, it just tries to resize the content to fit the screen. It does it in a very, very simple manner. It's just flowing that content into a container. If I pinch and zoom, it resizes the content to fit the container. And it does solve some of the basic issues, but it's not a great solution by any stretch of the imagination. It's doing the bare minimum needed to basically allow us to solve the problem of at least fitting onto a phone. But that's not a really great experience, and it only, if it does address one problem, solves one problem alone, which is the responsive side of things, the reading of it. And I think responsiveness is much more than that. We've had several speakers today talk about math and the ability for math to be understood, the data to be in the document. If you think about how you have responsiveness in math, maybe it is a matter of, if you're a teacher, allowing your math to be displayed and to highlight what's being read as your screen reader reads it. That may be for AT, but it also may be just, I'm not a great math reader. I don't understand all the complex notation. I would really like that equation read to me in natural language. And I would like to know what's being read to me so I can learn about math. I mean, that's a common, we heard about Ross Moore and Neil Seufer's projects to basically do math and to display math, and they've even got a math reader that works with NVDA that uses MathML to display and to highlight mathematics. But if it's just drawings on the page, you can't do that. And so you need that rich data, that rich semantics in the PDF to achieve that. And now, it's not just about the visual appearance of the screen. I'm now communicating with devices, both verbally, I'm speaking to it and it's speaking back to me orally. This may be a phone, this may be Siri, this may be some other assistant. It may be my Google Home or Amazon Echo. It may be my car as I'm driving to work and I want to listen to the latest report that I just received. If I'm a business, I've just received an important report by email, I want to listen to it as I go to work. I listen to audiobooks all the time, but if I receive a PDF, can I just load that into my car speaker and go? So it's not just about these simple use cases, and that's why it's not just about accessibility. Accessibility is really important. It's something I care about passionately. But in this case, we're talking fully mainstream things that everyone can benefit from. I did consider putting in another slide, one that talked about things like virtual reality, augmented and mixed reality, and how PDF can play a role in that. But I don't think we need to go into that much depth, but I want to kind of highlight the fact that this problem is a mainstream problem, and things that mainstream users can benefit from if we can figure out how to put more data and more semantics into PDF. So that's a little snapshot of responsiveness. I'm sure there's many other ways to consider it. Those were just some of the ways I think about it. The other part of my topic is personalization. What do I mean by personalization? So, give it a second to catch up. There are many types of fonts in the world, and we heard this morning in one of the talks, I think it was this morning, about how not to use serif fonts in our documents, because for dyslexic readers, those fonts are pretty difficult to read. On the other hand, that seems really painful if I've been deprived of all my font faces that I like, because I happen to like serif fonts. If I can only choose one font for my document and no one can change that font, then I'm locked in. I have to build one copy of the document. But if I don't, if I can personalize my document as an end user, if I can consume it differently, that enables me to make things much, much more accessible while also retaining all the visual fidelity that I wanted to put in as a designer. Note, I am a terrible designer. No one would ever allow me to do a design, but a hypothetical designer who can actually do that competently. So what I find comfortable to read isn't the same as what everyone else finds comfortable to read. And 10 years from now, what I find comfortable to read will be very different from what I find comfortable to read now. So as I try to scale my document, as I magnify again, we think of this in the accessibility space. I had a good friend in college who had I forget the name of the disease, but his eyes could not stay still. And to read, he had to basically, he got the biggest monitor at the time, some massive 21 inches. Okay, back in those days, that sounded impressive. but a big monitor, and he'd sit literally up against it and have to expand the text to the largest size he could to read it. For a PDF, this was incredibly painful because he would have to move back and forth through this document, reading it. So what's comfortable to me isn't necessarily comfortable to you. What's comfortable, depending on the size of the screen I'm displaying on, could be very different as well. It doesn't have to just be, it's the context with which I'm viewing the material as much as it is the specific attributes of an individual. There have been some studies of late about reading speeds and the ability for people to consume content, and they've shown that actually it varies a lot from person to person. Things like character spacing can have a huge impact on reading speed and comprehension, particularly in school children. Word spacing, again, just really helps with understanding that content, as well as the line height. These are just some of the properties. In fact, some of the studies have used many different characteristics of typography to understand how it impacts people. And the answer is, as with everything else, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. You can't choose a type or a layout that's going to suit your entire audience. So how do you address that? How do we solve these problems? And I think this is, for me, the biggest challenge facing PDF. We do need that visual fidelity. Just to be clear, there's no doubt that PDF serves a huge purpose in having that fixed layout. But how do we let it serve both purposes, or maybe all three? The visual fidelity, fixed content, final form is the term that we've been using, the term of art. While managing to respond to the size of the screen, the nature of the user, the needs of the device, how do we actually address this space? And I think this is the biggest challenge and the biggest thing that PDF faces in its future. So I'm actually not going to present a solution today. There is no one solution, just like there is no one-size-fits-all solution for each of these individual problems. But I do want to just kind of focus a little bit more on the problem we face and why it's a challenge for PDF. So I talked earlier about printing to PDF. And as I say, that's a very common scenario. I take the visual material. So even today, if you use older systems of LaTeX, it converts a device-independent layout that loses all the rich semantics of the original content, and then it visually lays it out into PDF, maybe even via PostScript still. That can be a pretty horrific several-step process where what you get at the end has no knowledge of what was there at the beginning. But it can get even worse just because a lot of systems just don't even think about semantics in the first place. They don't even know about that. At least LaTeX, Word, there's a level of semantics there. But there's a lot of document systems, document publishing systems that don't necessarily know that. So it's really important, if you care about the semantics, that you have that up front. But then you have to think about creation paths that don't rely on just printing to get to the PDF. So this delay is really annoying. So we've heard a bit about one of the solutions, which is tagged PDF. So tagged PDF has actually been in PDF for a long time. I think we talked about it before. The ability to put logical structure into PDF was introduced in 1999. The tag sets that we define as tagged PDF came in 2001. And so tagged PDF has been available to us for a long time. And the fact that it's somewhere in that 15 to 20% of the market today is actually pretty good. I mean, to say how hard it is to produce, the fact that people are going out of their way to produce it, I think is a really positive story. I mean, that people say 15 to 20%, that's very low. But given how easy it is to print a PDF and how hard it is to produce semantic PDF, I take that as a very positive message. But we need to continue to build value on it, because until now, it's been a compliance thing to put tagging into PDF. There's not a lot of end user benefit. And I think that's something we have to really think about as we move forward with PDF, is how do we continue to build features that are available to everyone, workflows that enable potentially anyone to achieve an end goal, rather than just data for the sake of data, or meeting a compliance goal by doing this. They may help move these things forward, but they're not going to be enough, I think, to really deliver a future of intelligent documents. Let's just touch a little bit on the fundamental issues that PDF faces, though. So I'm going to go a little bit low level now. I'll try not to spend too much time on this. But basically, here's a standard PDF page. It looks better on my screen. Basically, let's just look at one paragraph. So we'll move in a little closer so we can actually see what's in that content. So when I'm laying out this content in a PDF, I'm just drawing glyphs to a page. I'm just painting locations on the page. I could decide to print all the consonants before all the vowels, all of one font before another font. It's up to me, the author or the authoring system, to decide how to compose that. As long as the canvas looks right at the end, you're good. But that's not good enough for actually using this content. You don't necessarily know a lot of information about this content in an old-fashioned PDF. What are the Unicode values for the text that's actually in use here? Now I say Unicode, and a lot of people think that we actually put Unicode into PDF. And there is a mechanism to do that. It's actually not really required very often in reality. The reality is that fonts have encodings, and those encodings can be well defined. And so the ability to get to a well-defined Unicode value is the important thing, not how you get there. But the ability to say that this is a space, this is a character T, this is an H, this is important. I mean, for any type of content reuse, read aloud, anything that you want to do with this, you have to know what the text is, what it means. I think it was brought up earlier in one of the talks about language. What language is it in? Now, a lot of people, when they think about language, think about pronunciation problems. I've got a word in French in the middle of my English document, and it's going to sound funny if it's pronounced with my accent, and it would sound funny in my accent under all circumstances. But actually, that's not the only problem. Imagine I'm reflowing this content into a smaller box, and I want to hyphenate it. If I hyphenate words, I'd have to know their language to choose good hyphenations. I need a dictionary. I need to be able to understand where I can split a word without causing problems, without it changing the meaning. And so when you actually do think about reuse, understanding the language has many applications to how you can then reuse that content later, beyond just the obvious pronunciation. Word disambiguation. So there are some languages in the world that don't, in their written form, use explicit spacing, but most Western languages, as we know, do. We put spaces between our words. But given that a lot of PDFs use kerning operations to bring text closer and further apart, it can be very hard to distinguish between a kerning operation and a space. tagged PDF actually says a lot about, and I should have said this up front, tagged PDF, it addresses all of these things. Tagged PDF has rules that apply to each of these things to make it good. So people think about it as the semantics, but it's actually not just that. Tagged PDF is the fundamental rules for making content machine accessible. And so by rather than having to guess where spaces are in my content, if I can actually have an explicit space character in a language that requires it, I can actually understand how to break words, how to do that reflow again, where to put my spaces, where to put my hyphens, because now I know how to flow that content into a box. The only reason I know this as a heading as a human is that I infer that from certain styling changes. In this case, it's a bold, it's a bigger color. Maybe it changes font from in some documents from from serif body text to sans serif headings. It doesn't do in this case. This is all sans serif. But basically, I have an option I know as a human how to infer that this is a heading. But how does a computer know that? So again, you have to encode that information into the PDF so it can understand it. Now, again, we always think of this as so that someone who's perhaps blind can use assistive technology to walk through the headings of the document, and that's a great use case. But if I'm consuming a long document, it can be very valuable to know where all the headings are just to allow me to navigate through it. This can be an end-user feature that's for everyone. The ability to build natural tables of contents if the document doesn't contain one for the end user, the ability to provide non-linear navigation through the document to build on those features is very valuable, and it means you don't have to, as an author, make all those decisions up front as to what to put into the document before you actually try to go to publication. Again, I'm just pointing out here with a paragraph, how do I differentiate between body text, the paragraphs of a document, versus the different types of semantic structures that are in here? Stepping back out to the main content, if I'm visually reflowing content, for example, in this case, you can't see it on this screen, but you can see it when I have a background around my text. Is that background semantically significant? Is it just a visual artifact that I, as a typographer, as a designer, put in to make my document look a little bit nicer? Or did it have semantic significance? Only the author really can tell you that. And therefore, you have to know that if you're going to, let's say, reflow, do I need to keep that background color, or can I discard it as I'm reusing that content? I intentionally chose a 2-column document just to touch on reading order. I mean, reading order is more fundamental than just column to column. It's the flow of a paragraph. It's the flow of a single word. PDF actually, tagged PDF, says that basically these documents have to have order at the word level, at the block level, at the document level. And so using the tag tree, I can actually get the semantics out of the document. And the reading order, which is really important for many purposes. There are other higher level semantics, lists and tables. I put question marks, I don't even know if they really are lists or tables. The author sometimes has to make that determination. Also, when we lay out content, there's information injected into that, artifacts of typography and layout, that you don't really want to actually repeat or necessarily flow in the same order as the content. Being able to identify those is really important. This is missing my slide stuff. Okay, well anyway, I had 2 more slides. I was going to talk on data for a minute. Basically, we've heard about data. The ability to inject data into the document is really important. And since I'm almost out of time, it's probably good that I don't have too much to say on this. But math data, table data, extra information that I can use when making good choices. Maybe I'm on a phone and instead of wanting to display that table, I want to display a chart. I'll give the user the option to see a chart. Those are really important features that data enables. And namespaces. So PDF 2.0, PDF 1.7, you only knew our tag set. When I say our tag set, the one that Adobe put in there and then published as part of the ISO standard. It's a very simplistic tag set. If you want to convey more complex structures, there's no way in PDF to tell someone what that structure is. You can use any custom structure you want, but how do I communicate that in a way that allows another processor opening it to understand what it is? PDF 2.0 introduces a namespace concept where you can actually describe the schema that is being used for a piece of data. So you can now put more complex data into PDF. But the final takeaway I want to give is that I think there's a lot of mainstream use cases for data and semantics in PDF. And that the more we unlock these, the more we bring these into the mainstream, the more our viewers actually make these available to end users, the more natural impetus there is for the creators to put that data in the first place. Hey, put all this data into this PDF and maybe 1% of your users will ever benefit from it. Isn't a great story. But put this data into a PDF and 80% of your users will benefit from it is a much more compelling story. And I think that that is the future of PDF in terms of sort of reuse and personalization is, how do we put this information in there and make those use cases mainstream rather than, say, compliance or niche areas? So I'll wrap up there. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, everyone.